Hi, everyone, and welcome to this lab where we will be taking a listing of journal entries from a client's ledger and translating them into a trial balance. All right, so let's hop over to the computer now and take a look at what we have. All right, on your screen, you can see we have a listing of journal entries that occurred in the current year, and the first column contains the date. The second column here, column B, contains the journal entry number. We have the account name in column C, and then we have the debit and credit amount. Uh, these last two columns here, columns F and G, are the initials of the employees at the company that entered and approved these journal entries. So our job here is to take this listing of journal entries from the ledger and create a trial balance from those entries, which requires us to sum up all of the amounts that were debited and credited to each unique account. Okay, so how can we do this? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to create a pivot table. Right, so we're going to select all of the data in this sheet. So I'm just going to highlight cell A1 all the way down to cell G106. Okay, so now that we have the data highlighted, we can go insert pivot table, and we get this pop-up window here. So it's asking us select a table or range from which we will create the pivot table. Now, since I've already selected those cells in the sheet, it's automatically populating this field for us. We don't need to do anything additional. And then it says choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. So we could, if we wanted to, place the pivot table in the worksheet that we're currently working in. But it's always best practice to put a pivot table into its very own worksheet. Okay, so that's what I'm going to click. Okay, so now we have a setup here where we have a pivot table box here, and over to the right we have our controls for the pivot table. So we can choose which fields we want to work with. We can choose whether or not we want to calculate values for those fields. We can do all sorts of things with pivot tables. And the beauty of pivot tables is it allows you to do things to the data without altering the underlying data that we have in the journal entries. So the changes that we make in this sheet won't affect the original data, which is important because sometimes we'll make a mistake as we're going through our data analysis and we'll have to go back and redo something. And if we're working with the original data and altering the original data, then we don't have a copy to go back to. All right, so that's the beauty of pivot tables here. The other beautiful thing about pivot tables is we can click and drag, and it allows us to calculate things very quickly. All right, so what do we want? We want to create a trial balance. So to create a trial balance, we need a table that has in the rows the various account names that are in our journal entries. And when we drop this account name field into the rows, we get the result on your left here. And you'll notice no account is repeated. So it's labeling each account, each unique account, but it's not, if the same account is used multiple times, for example, if there are multiple journal entries made to the accounts receivable, the pivot table is only listing it once because that is a unique account, and it'll allow us to calculate all the amounts that were debited or credited to accounts receivable in total. All right, so we have the accounts receivable here in cell A4, and now what we can do is we can add columns to this pivot table, and we'll do that by clicking and dragging the debit and credit fields into the values column. So we'll drag debit and we'll drag credit into the values. So now you see we have the account names in the first column, and then the total of the debits in the second column, and then the total of the credits in the third column. Beautiful, right? And then down the bottom we have the totals for all debits, all credits. As we would hope, the debits in total equal the credits in total, which is perfect. You can never make a journal entry without having the debits equal the credits. So we're looking good. The one thing I don't like here is that accounts receivable has an amount in both the debit column and the credit column. So why is that? Well, it's likely that the company made a sale to a customer or customers and said to them, pay us later. So they created an accounts receivable for the customers. Then later, maybe 30 days later, the customer makes a payment on those balances. And when the payment is made by the customer, the journal entry is debit, cash, credit, accounts receivable. So likely what's happening here is these debits represent the original sale amount. So the original sale would be debit, accounts receivable, credit, sales revenue. Okay. So this is maybe at the time of the sale. Oops. At the time of the sale. And then this is at the time of payment by the customer. And let's just fix my spelling there. I was typing too quickly. So, all right, so we have, here's the journal entry that was made at the time of the sale. Here's the journal entry when the customer pays. So you can see here we're debiting accounts receivable, right? And then here we're crediting accounts receivable. So this doesn't indicate, the fact that we have an amount in the debit column and an amount in the credit column doesn't mean there's a mistake. It simply means that we're capturing two different types of transactions that are being recorded as journal entries in the system, which is fine, which is the way we want to see it. But when we're making a trial balance, we have to net these two. So one thing that we have to do here is, I'm just going to get rid of this explanation here. So we want to click into any cell within the pivot table, and we're going to go up top here to the ribbon, and we're going to say Pivot Table Analyze. And we want to select, or we want to add a field. So we want to add what's called a calculated field. All right, and we're going to call this first field, we're going to call it net debits. And we're going to create a formula here. So our formula is going to be, if debit is greater than credit, we want to do debit minus credit. Okay, and then we'll click add. And then we want to create one for net credits. And this is going to be very similar, but in this case, we're going to say if the credits are greater than the debits, we want to do credit minus debit. Okay. Oh, looks like I have a misspelling there. And so we'll add this one as well. An item cannot be found. Check that you typed the name correctly. So it looks like I typed debits and credits when I should have just typed without the S, credit and debit. So let's see if this fixes it. Okay. All right. So it looks like we have what we want. Let's double check ourselves here. So if we were to say debit minus credit, we would expect to see 22,200 in the debits column, and that's exactly what we see. If we scroll down further, notes payable, so we have 4,000 of debits and 31,300 of credits, and so we would expect to see this minus this as a credit balance, and that's exactly what we see. Okay, so now we validated that our new pivot table fields are correct, and so we can get rid of these check figures that I've created. And now we don't need the sum of the debits or the sum of the credits any longer. So I'm just going to remove these and only include the net debits and the net credits. Okay. All right. So now we have the beginnings of our trial balance. One thing I want to fix here is the formatting. So I'd like for this to be accounting format. So I'm going to say number up here, and then I'm going to use a comma separator, and let's change this to accounting. I don't want any decimal places. I'm okay with the $sign, so I'll click OK here. So we have a nicely formatted beginning or draft of a trial balance here. Okay. Another thing I don't like is the grand totals here are not calculating the way we would like. And so for us to move forward with our trial balance, I'm just going to copy the pivot table, and I'm going to create a new sheet. And in the new sheet, I am going to do a paste special. So I'm going to say, give me the values only. Don't worry about giving me the formulas. Okay. And now what I can do is I can write my own formula. And I'm going to say that this is the sum of this, right? And then I'm going to say that. And now we have a pretty decent trial balance. So I'm going to reformat this again. I'm going to say that this is accounting. Changes to accounting with a $sign, no decimal places. Okay, nice. I'm going to format the grand total row. I'm going to bold this. In accounting, we like to use some outlines for the cells to indicate whether or not we have a total or not. So I'm going to add a double bottom border to this cell here. So I'm going to say top and double bottom border. Okay. All right, that looks pretty good. Columns we should usually bold, and we could put a little border on here to indicate it's not part of the actual table. This is a header row. We can resize these columns so that everything looks nice. But overall, we're in pretty good shape here. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about here in this table is the ordering of the accounts. So typically a trial balance is it's normally ordered in the way that you would expect to see a balance sheet and the income statement ordered. In other words, assets first, liability second, equity third, and then revenues fourth, expenses fifth, gains and losses sixth. And so we should see those types of accounts ordered in that way in our trial balance. It looks like Excel kind of ordered these by alphabetically by the account name, which is not incorrect. It's just not normally how we do it in accounting practice. Okay, so one way we could do this, or one way we could rearrange these things, is we could just literally cut and paste these different rows. So for example, accounts receivable is typically followed by a allowance for doubtful accounts. So we want to move this row. So I'm just going to literally click the row 4, select the entire row, right click, hit cut, and then come up to row 3, and I'm going to say insert cut cells. Okay, so let's see that again. Accumulated depreciation was in row 2. Allowance for doubtful accounts was in row, accumulated depreciation was in row 3. Allowance for doubtful accounts was in row 4. So let's see if we redo this. All right, so now I've rearranged those things. So all I did was I clicked on the row, right click, cut, and then right click on the place that I want to paste it and clicked paste. Okay, and we could continue to do this all the way through and get our correctly ordered trial balance. All right, so in this video, we took some journal entry data from a company's accounting system and turned it into a trial balance. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks for watching. Take care.